The Arizona Cardinals, or as I like to call them, the slowest slow burn in the entire NFL. We are in year 3 of a complete teardown and rebuild out in the desert, and each passing season has been just a little bit better than the last. Coming off an 8-9 year with some true flashes of brilliance throughout, there's one thing on this fan base's mind. Have they done enough to finally make the playoffs again? This is day 6 of this year's Bootleg Summer Series, 32 teams in 32 episodes, previewing the entire 2025 NFL season. In each one of these episodes, we use film, analytics, salary cap breakdowns, and all manner of nitty-gritty football nerddom to answer the 3 questions that make up the central pillar of this series. What was this team's identity before? What is their identity now? And what does a successful 2025 season for this team actually look like? For the Cardinals, the answer to that last question is fairly obvious. They need to play real, meaningful football in January, finally. But what is less obvious is all the subtle things this franchise has been doing, not just this offseason, but the last couple of offseasons to make that dream a reality. That is what we're diving into today. So, Jay, Autumn, Anthony, please roll the intro.
The Bootleg Summer Preview Series rolls on, and today our stop is in the dusty deserts of the Southwest. The Arizona Cardinals climbed out of the NFC West cellar last year, but still couldn't manage a 500 finish. And while head coach Jonathan Gannon and GM Monty Ossenfort have brought a level of stability and coherence to the Arizona football program, they're going to have to do even more this year because the division has continued to rise up around them. So today on Bootleg, we'll figure out whether these desert birds are going to fly this year or crash back to Earth. And as always, to help me out with that is renowned avian expert and my wonderful co-host, Brett Coleman. So Brett, how are you? And how do you feel about the Cardinals' chances heading into 2025?
Renowned avian expert Brett Coleman is a string of words that nobody's ever said before in the history of this planet. So congratulations, EJ.
Winning.
You hit it first. I will say this team, the more I dig into it, the more frustrated I get because, and I'm not saying anything that Cardinals fans don't already know. This team was so close to being good.
Yep.
Like, honestly, truly so close to being good. And you saw the flashes of brilliance all throughout the season. You know, they played some really good teams, really tough. And even just when digging into their metrics and you know the analytics profile, like they were better than they should have been in some ways, and they weren't as good as they should have been in other ways. And what it all added up to was a team that it should have been like a 6 or a 7 seed if they just fixed one unit on this team, which is their pass rush, and they probably would have been playing in January. But they're really, really close. And I think, you know, with the additions they've made this offseason and getting a couple guys back healthy, and, you know, ideally continuing to have their strengths last year still be strengths this year, maybe even stronger in some cases. Is it crazy to say that they actually could be a playoff team? Because they were damn close to being acceptably okay last year.
There are a couple of injuries and just non-development options throughout players that I think will be rectified this year that might turn around those fortunes. And we'll talk about those players individually as we go through everything on the Cardinals, as we always do. But yeah, the line was extremely thin for this team last year. And I think you nailed it when you said frustrating. You watch them and you're like, if you just got one more of those, you'd be good. You would have. And again, Cardinals fans know all this, so we're not going to flog you through that too much, but we do have to talk about how they did in 2024. Overall record, 8-9, rank in the division third, home record 6-3, road record 2-6. In the last 5 games, they did stumble a little bit. They were 2-3 again, adding to that frustration of, man, if you just put a couple of those together, you would have been threatening for a playoff spot. And I do think they can do it this year. We'll see whether or not they do. They, as every team, have to hit some green lights to do it, but it is not out of the realm of possibility.
before we get to effectiveness summary and power score and all that kind of stuff, I just want to set the stage. There were 4 key, I guess you could say, narratives to pay attention to last year that ideally they're all going to get better this year. So they had a really efficient offense, in particular, a deadly efficient run game. Pass game was hit or miss because they apparently couldn't throw fades, which we'll get into later in the show. They could not rush the passer, but it doesn't mean that they had a terrible defense. They were actually okay defensively. It's just they couldn't do the one thing that was arguably the most important thing for any defense to do, which is get the quarterback on the ground. And they also struggled to get running backs on the ground, too, because they were one of the worst tackling teams in the NFL. You know, guys were in the right spot often, and their coaching staff did a great job of scheming guys into opportunities to, you know, get free runs at tackles for loss, or, you know, they did a really good job of scheming themselves into position to shut down the screen game and to shut down the outside run game. It's just the actual tackling part that betrayed them a lot. So you're going to see all these numbers and metrics and rankings, and you're going to be like, that's not super great. But they were truly on a knife's edge between being as bad as they ended up being and top half of the league in almost everything. It's just that extra 5% of execution was the difference for this team, and it led to a record and rankings in almost every metric that were pretty disappointing, frankly.
This is every high school coach in America right now. You got to finish, right? You're just screaming it at the Cardinals. Because, again, for the power score, we take passing offense, passing defense, rushing defense, all determined by EPA. The number of points they put up, the number of points they allowed. We just take their league ranks, all 6 of those, average them out, and we figure out how powerful this team was or how good at football this team was. And if there was ever a tale of two cities, it's the Arizona Cardinals from 2024. Passing offense, 13th. Rushing offense, 8th. You can get away with those numbers. That, in the modern NFL, those are good offensive numbers. You can win a lot of football games with that. When we get to the defense, it's the other side of the city. Pass defense, 24th. Rushing defense, 25th. Points scored, again, back to the offense, 12th. That's good enough to win a bunch of games. And points allowed, strangely, even with those defensive rankings in the mid-20s, they were only 15th. They were dead middle of the pack in terms of scoring defense. So when you add all those up, divide by 6, you find out that the Cardinals were the 14th most powerful team last year, which sounds like, yeah, you know, just above the middle of the pack. They could be challenging for a playoff spot, but because of the way they did it and some of the breaks that they incurred, it just didn't happen for them.
And I'm going to start with the defense because it sounds so weird to have, you know, rushing and passing EPA allowed per play to be 24th and 25th and still be the 15th best defense as far as scoring goes. They were really good in the red zone. They were 7th best out of every defense in the NFL as far as red zone touchdown scoring percentage. So when you got down there and space was more constricted, they were also a better tackling team in the red zone, which helps too. I don't know why, but they were. But they were really tough to score on when you got into that constricted space. They were 7th best overall as far as scoring drive percentage allowed. That should be reflected in EPA, but it's not, because as far as field goal drives allowed, they were one of the worst defenses in the NFL. So when they did get people to stall out, they stalled out in field goal range, not before they got to field goal range. And yes, it helps to keep teams from getting 7 and okay, we're going to make them get 3s over and over and over again. But if they get a lot of 3s and you never get real stops, you never make them punt deep in their own territory to set up our own offense for success, and they're still getting points over and over and over again, that's why the EPA numbers were bad, because they never actually stopped teams, or at least rarely stopped teams, before they got into field goal range. A lot of that was because they were terrible on third down. They were a bottom 5 defense on third down in the NFL. If you're looking at total plays per drive on average, they had the 4th highest plays per drive against them at 6.5, which means they almost never got 3 and outs forced. That all ties into how bad their pass rush was, because if you have a bad pass rush on third down and, you know, quarterback just has forever to sit there and fire, it's going to be really tough on that young secondary that they have. Expanding on the pass rush, earmuffs, Cardinals fans. I know this is bad. So they had the fourth highest blitz percentage, and we're still 27th in pressure percentage, which are two numbers that should not go together, but they did because they're the Cardinals and their two best pass rushers, basically the only ones they could rely on at all, were Baron Browning and Dennis Gardeck, who we like as role players. But if we're categorizing pass rushers as Batman, Robin, and Alfred, those are two Alfreds. And if your team has two Alfreds as your two best pass rushers and you don't have a Batman and you don't have a Robin, you're going to struggle on third down. That's why they brought in Sweat. They hope to get Ojulari back healthy. Like, ideally, they have a fully formed pass rush this year, but they did not last year. So drives just kept extending over and over and over again, and teams were stalling out at like the 33-yard line instead of their own 45, which is why they just constantly kept getting those field goals. And then if you're looking at the other side, offensively, this is a pretty good offense overall. Like you mentioned, 12th in points scored, but it always felt like when they needed the scoring drive to happen, like when they absolutely needed points, that's when they would stall out. That's when they, couldn't get it together. That's when they had penalties. That's when, they would chuck fades down the field and that they would never get completed. Fun fact, by the way, this team threw 44 fades and go balls this last year, which was seventh most in the league, and they completed 8 of them. So if you're getting into late game situations where like, oh, we need a chunk, let's throw up a 50-50 ball to Marvin, and you never actually complete those, and you're just burning a down on that rather than doing what actually works for your offense, which for them was running the ball, then yeah, like you're gonna fail when your offense needs to succeed. And you're going to be subpar in late game situations. You're going to be subpar in 2-minute and 4-minute situations. So again, this team, the point I'm trying to convey here with all these numbers, they were really close to being good. Like the defense was better than they should have been with a really shitty pass rush. And the offense wasn't as good as they should have been with, an above average starting quarterback and a young, hopefully phenom receiver. I wish I could explain why they underperformed, and I really can't. But the bones are there. Like, it's not like the rot is to the core. I wouldn't even say that they're rotten at all. I struggle to think of a team last year that did less with what they had than Arizona, and they don't get a lot of flack for it because nobody pays attention to the Cardinals nationally, but we do. Like, we watch this team every week, and every single week, I know you and I would always text back and forth, like, are they bad or are they just disappointing? And for me, I think it's disappointing.
I like what you said about Knife's Edge, indicating that it can really go either way. And if it all worked out for the Cardinals, they would have looked a lot more like the Chiefs. And I know that is a crazy statement to make, but the Chiefs were the same way, but on third down, the breaks went their way, largely because of Patrick Mahomes and his play on third down. And he tilted the table for the Chiefs. I'm not saying that's everything. Certainly the coaching staffs are not overall similar. But again, if you're looking at a team that gets to these break points, these high leverage points within a game, and we know that NFL games come down to just a few plays. If you win on those plays, if you have the answers on those plays, and the Chiefs did, you'll win a lot more games than you lose, not just a few. And the Cardinals were almost like the anti-Chiefs. Every time they came up against those situations, as you said, when they needed a play, when they were throwing fades down the field and they were expecting them to connect, or they'd connected in the past and they were used to moving the offense that way, it just didn't work. Drive sputtered. They ended up not converting as many of those, and you only need a few, and they just couldn't get them. So it is frustrating, and we were frustrated all of last year saying, man, if they just hit that one and that one, they would have walked away with a W here. But they didn't consistently. A team like the Chiefs does, and you see the difference in result.
They were right there with KC in, most of like the key, offensive macro metrics, in terms of plays per drive. How hard are you to get rid of? They were 4th in plays per drive. They were 7th in scoring drive percentage on offense. They were 5th in successful play percentage. They were right there with KC in all of, the core macro metrics that just determine if you can operate an offense, right? And yet the Chiefs won 15 games and the Cardinals won 8. And it's not entirely on the offense. Like, they did score a lot of points, and I would more say it was on the defense than the offense, but it's not like the defense was that bad at keeping, opponents out of the paint. Like, they were 15th in points allowed. And to have a 15th ranked scoring defense and a 12th ranked scoring offense go sub 500, it almost defies logic. Like, we've gone through teams so far in this series. We're only in the second division. We've gone through teams that are worse in most of these key metrics that won more games, that made the playoffs, even with very young quarterbacks. And I don't think it's a coaching issue. Like, I think Gannon has coached well. I think their coordinators have coached well. I really can't explain it. That's what's frustrating, is like our job is to explain why teams underperform, and I can't explain why the Cardinals are the Cardinals. It's one of the weirdest teams we're going to talk about all summer.
Well, I can take a swing at it. And again, I alluded to it at the top with 2 players that I think could really turn the fortunes for the Cardinals as we move into 2025. And one is Marvin Harrison Jr. Now, Marvin Harrison Jr. came in as one of the most heralded wide receiver recruits ever. And he didn't pan out the way everybody thought he would in his rookie season. He's learned from that. He's been around the game his entire life. And if you've seen pictures of Marvin Harrison, he took his offseason very, very seriously. He's added about 15 pounds of muscle. He understands that the NFL is not the same game space-wise, press-wise, release-wise, that the college game is, and he knows what he needs to do to be more successful. Is that going to pan out on the field? I wouldn't bet against it, given his competitive nature and just his general skill level all around, which is what everybody was expecting to see in his rookie season, and it just sputtered. It kind of didn't get there. The player on defense that I think has a very similar sort of high leverage return in an area that we were highlighting, pass rush, is Darius Robinson. Missed the entire season with injury. He's coming back. He's going to be healthy. Again, they drafted him to address that need and really just didn't get his services for most of the year. Now he comes back healthy, and they've made other upgrades in the pass rush as well. So if I need to sort of say, okay, if it's such a thin margin, what could tilt it? It's about the players on the field making plays, right? Comes down to talent in the NFL. You can have great coaching, great scheme, but if you don't have guys that deliver on Sunday on the field, you're not going to win as many games. And in 2 key areas, moving the offense forward, getting those explosive chunk plays, we're talking about EPA, and again, pass rush, Marvin Harrison Jr. underperformed in his rookie season, and Darius Robinson didn't get a chance to perform in his. Both of those guys are going to come back stronger, healthier than they were last year, and might be the way the Cardinals start to turn the tables on opponents in 2025.
Yeah, I mean, Darius got like a little bit of a chance. He did play in 6 games, but he never started. I think he got like 10 total tackles and 1 sack. So it's like he was on the field, but barely, to your point, because of injury. So he never really got a rookie season. And I'm pretty sure he got hurt all the way back. His first injury, I think, was all the way back this time last year. I think he went into training camp already kind of banged up, and it just compounded from there. Cardinals fans can correct me in the comments. But again, you're drafting Marvin Harrison Jr., one of the greatest, fade ball artists that college football's ever seen. They throw him the second most fades out of any receiver in the NFL, and he catches 6 of them. It's not like Kyler can't throw a fade. We've seen him throw a fade plenty of times before to DeAndre Hopkins, and we know that Marvin can catch fades like nobody's business. They could not get on the same page. It was so weird. Like, this team is just weird. And there was like a fire hose of numbers that we just threw at everybody the last 25 minutes. I apologize if that was overwhelming. Reminder, if you're a patron, you can go on our Patreon, link to the description below, or at the QR code on the screen. We have all these infographics for every single team. All the numbers we've talked about and more, many, many more, are there for all of our patrons. So if you want a full statistical breakdown on everything that has to do with the Cardinals, you want to look at their most common run concepts, which the Cardinals, by the way, super fun run game. They don't have a similar run game to anybody else in the NFL. If you want to see exactly what they ran and how they ran it and when they ran it, if you want to see passing maps, if you want to see, how they allocate their dollars in free agency, we have everything in the infographics. You can find all that over on the Patreon. And especially if you just listen to the last 20 minutes of this show where we spat a bunch of numbers at you and you need to go back and see a physical reference of it, that's all waiting for you. But ideally, when you're listening to this show and when you see all these stats, it's going to paint a picture of a team that I believe is ready to be good. I really do think they're ready to be good. They've gotten better each of the last few years. They've done one of the more complete teardowns and rebuilds under this regime. Really the big thing was bringing in Monty, who, no shade to the previous GM, but I almost feels like the adults are in charge finally. And so he had a big task ahead of them, and they've made incremental progress. And I do feel like now this year is finally when it's all going to come together, and it's almost going to be like a Detroit Lions type of ascension where you saw the glimmers of hope, and I think those glimmers of hope are going to turn into actual production and wins.
Yeah, now that you've tied it all together and you've had 3 seasons to really, again, root out things that didn't work under the old regime, get a unified plan, again, with a new head coach, and get on the same page as an organization, because the Cardinals were the poster children of the NFL for not being able to do that. It feels like they're past that, and that is a major point for Arizona Cardinals fans to just have hope in, is that this is a regime that looks like it knows how to put together a program that will work at the NFL level. And I don't know that that was truly a thing before, especially not in the previous regime. It is now, again, the GM, Monty Ossenfort, the head coach, Jonathan Gannon, who has done a tremendous job coaching around a lot of the holes he had in personnel. And we'll talk about that a little bit, but both you and I are a fan of the job he's done there. The assistant head coach for this team is the special teams coach, Jeff Rogers, which is interesting. It's not that we don't see that anywhere in the NFL, but it is rare. The OC is Drew Petzing. As much as we love his running game, there was a lot of the passing game last year that we kind of looked at and went, okay. Like, if it's not working, you have to adjust. I mean, again, take the nod from your head coach.
Can we do something other than fades? Thanks, Drew. Okay. Yeah,
you got to take the nod from your head coach, who's done a great job adjusting, and say, add that feather in your cap. See if you can add that skill in your quiver. Haven't seen that from Drew. Need to this year, certainly, for the Arizona Cardinals to take the next step. The DC is Nick Rallis, and the passing game coordinator and the wide receivers coach, I'm just going to throw him in here as well, Drew Terrell. He's got a lot of things to prove this year, and both his success along with or combined with Drew Petzing are going to be the measure of how far this team's able to go. Again, the offense was good last year. They scored a relatively high number of points, certainly enough to win more games, but they're going to have to put even more pressure on other teams this year. Other notable coaches on offense, Ben Steele is the tight ends coach. And on defense, I'm not even going to try and pronounce Winston's last name. Winston is the defensive line coach. He's got a lot to do this year. Obviously, if we want the pass rush to come up, much of that's going to come from him. I put him on this list not only because of that, but because that's one of the most interesting last names in the NFL, even if I can't attempt to say it.
Yeah, I'm not even going to try.
Nope.
Again, if somebody can spell out like the phonetic spelling in the comments, I'd appreciate that.
Well, we'd love that. That'd be great.
I would love that. I am not about to butcher that man's name to a national audience. So, Winston, shout out to you.
Go get him.
I want to get into what this team did in free agency, because they've had some of the most roster turnover out of any ball club, not just over the last offseason, but the one before that and the one before that. I don't know how many guys are left on this team that were there in 2021, but it can't be more than a few. But I want to highlight some of their losses that have exited the building that I think, for the most part, are going to sting. Kazir White, linebacker, played 94% of the snaps last year. I've always been a Kazir White fan. He is now gone. Will Hernandez played a lot of snaps for this team for the last few years, only played 25% of their snaps last year, but he is also out of the building. Matt Prater, longtime kicker for them, 41-year-old kicker. Like, even by kicker standards, that's up there. He is out of the building. I look at Dennis Gardick, who I mentioned earlier, was one of their only effective pass rushers at all last year. He is now gone. He's in Jacksonville. Again, they are relying heavily on Josh Sweat coming in and BJ Ojulari coming back healthy to replace what production he had for them. Tristan Colon is out of the building, and Roy Lopez, who I don't want to say he's been a mainstay, but he has been like a very solid rotational role player for several years now in the league. He is now in Detroit. Kyrus Tonga, also want to mention him. He's now in New England. So quite a bit of roster turnover there. But as far as who they brought back, Kelvin Beachum played almost 70% of the snaps for them last year. He returns once again. He's been in Arizona for a long time at this point. 36 years young. Evan Brown brought him back as well. Trey McBride, because of, you have to pay Trey McBride at this point. He's one of the best weapons at any position in the entire NFL. $19 million and still somehow underpaid, in my opinion. Trey McBride back in Arizona. Baron Browning, the other half of the Cardinals pass rush last year, really the only other effective pass rusher they had besides Gardick. He is back on a $7.5 million a year deal. And Greg Dortch, still putting NFC West DBs in the Dorcher chamber. He is back in Arizona at 3.26 million, which for what the wide receiver market is right now, you get a number 3, number 4 type in Greg Dortch at virtually no money. It's a great signing for them. And then as far as third-party additions, guys they brought in from outside the organization, although it's kind of a misnomer, though, because Calais Campbell, former Cardinal, now Cardinal again, one of the greatest 5 techniques to ever play the sport, and I will die on that hill. 39 years at this point, and still playing effectively. He's back on a $5.5 million deal. Josh Sweat is there at $19.1 million, which sounds like a lot of money until you look at the top of the pass rush market, which is now $40 million, and you think to yourself, that ain't bad. That ain't bad for a pass rusher who could be a true number 1 here. And then Akeem Davis Gaither, who's he's bounced around the league a little bit, but he is now there to presumably be either a starting linebacker for them or at worst a special teams demon.
Certainly, I think going to help fill the gap left by Kazir White, who, again, we both are fans of, but played 95+% of the snaps last year. You had to go out and get somebody. Akeem Davis Gaither's been a bit of an understudy for the Bengals, but will probably play a more prominent role for the Cardinals, and is, again, a budget signing. If you're looking at the interior linebacker market, $5 million, not that much. So moving on to the draft, this team had a draft that we both really liked, especially up top. And they started it off in round 1, pick 16, with Walter Nolan, the defensive tackle from Ole Miss. This is, again, a player that will help them with pass rush. It's going to come from the interior of the defensive line, but Walter Nolan, one of my favorite players in this draft in terms of his bag. He has multiple different ways to get to the quarterback as an interior rusher, which is an incredibly valuable skill in the NFL. We'll see if it translates from college football to the NFL level, but he certainly has all the physical gifts to be able to do that. Some people were worried about consistency. Obviously not the Cardinals. They add him to that pass rush rotation in round 2. Pick number 47, they go for Will Johnson, the very talented but injured cornerback out of Michigan. If he had not been injured, I think Will Johnson would have been probably a top 15 pick in the NFL draft. As it was, didn't have a clean bill of health. A lot of folks worry about his knees. Cardinals doctor signed off on him. They get him in round 2 at number 47. If he is healthy, that is an incredible value. He is a shutdown cornerback and has that potential. And you don't get those folks down near the 50 mark in the draft. So Cardinals take a chance on health, and we'll see whether or not Will Johnson can pay that off for them. Round 3, probably my favorite pick for them in this draft, number 78 overall, Jordan Birch outside linebacker. Oregon played a little bit of defensive end, outside linebacker, played 4 sometimes for them, 5, 6, 7, all the way out to, sometimes 9, but usually not that wide. Heavy body defensive end who in the offseason was probably one of the highlight players for the Ducks. Was overshadowed by Derek Harmon's play and even maybe a little bit at the end by Jamari Caldwell's, but Jordan Birch, another valuable weapon for the Cardinals in increasing that pass rush, also very good against the run. As we get to day 3, round 4, number 115, Cody Simon, the linebacker from Ohio State. How did you feel about Cody Simon? Because I know what my take on him was, but I don't remember yours.
My take was he's going to play more on fourth down for them than the other 3. I know that sounds pessimistic, but I look at what makes a successful linebacker in today's NFL, at least I don't want to say top end. I'll just say successful starting linebacker in today's NFL. And I saw a special teamer. So a little early for me, but I like the first 3 picks a lot, and I'll get into them after we go through the whole draft. But that was the one where I was like, okay, all right, we'll keep going. Yeah.
Maybe before I would have picked him in terms of my take on Cody Simon, I saw a guy who was just an absolutely aggressive hammer against the run, and I feel really burned by a lot of these players because guys like Denzel Perryman and the like throughout the years, I've been like, nah, they don't have it. They can't pass protect. They're not going to play in the league. Denzel Perryman's on year, 12 or something. It's absolutely ridiculous. So made me take a pause on really hammering Cody Simon because he wasn't great in pass coverage and going, he's really aggressive against the run. Again, earlier than I would have taken him, but I'm not going to.
I look at it this way. Right? Like, this is a defense that blitzes a lot. Like, again, 4th highest blitz rate. And maybe if they get an effective pass rush with Sweat and Ojulari coming back, and you still have Baron Browning and Darius is coming back ideally healthy, maybe you get an effective pass rush where you don't have to blitz so much. But let's say they go from 4th to like 13th in blitz rate, because that's just what their identity is. When you blitz a lot, the linebacker that you leave in coverage has even more space that they have to deal with. Mm-hmm. And so if they don't think he can cover in space, that means all they're going to use him for is just blitzing. And at that point, you become predictable. You become telegraphed, because they're going to look at whatever your 2 linebackers are on the field. Let's say it's Akeem, and let's say it's Simon for whatever reason. Who do you think they're going to leave in coverage, and who do you think they're going to blitz? Because they ain't going to leave Cody in coverage. So, and if they do, cool, we'll move the chains again. But again, he's the type of linebacker in this style of defense where they blitz so much where I'm like, are you sure? Are you sure he's a good fit? But, maybe I'm wrong. We'll see.
All right. But what if you blitz the linebacker? Because actually Cody Simon is one of the better blitzing linebackers in this class. Again, blitzing, not pass rushing, 2 different things. I thought, boy, if there was a fit, I actually put out a tweet pretty early in the draft preview process that said if he ends up in Minnesota, he's going to have like 1 million sacks.
But that's the thing is, like, we had the same argument with Ivan Pace, and Ivan Pace went to Minnesota, and we're like, oh my God, this is perfect. Like,
that's right.
And they're going to blitz and then they did over and over and over again. And then you realize, like, oh, it doesn't actually work that well, because everybody knew that Cashman was going to cover, or Metellus was going to cover, and Pace was going to blitz, and they became super duper predictable.
Right.
And then Pace's snaps started getting dialed back because of that, because he couldn't do anything else.
Yeah.
And so it's like, blitzing is great, but if you can only do that, then, what else can you give me? Yeah. So again, 4th round, there's more time than I thought we'd spend on a 4th round linebacker, but
it's true.
But that's my argument, right?
No, and I would agree. It's a little early in terms of the versatility he provides, that's for sure. Moving on to round 5, pick 174, pick they got from the Cowboys, which was a compensatory pick. Denzel Burke, the corner from Ohio State, that came into this year with a lot of fanfare and I think did not survive the pre-draft process very well. When I dug into Denzel Burke's game, there wasn't as much there that I expected to see. And relative to this class of corners, I think this is an appropriate spot for him, maybe even a little bit early for me based on my rankings, but a talented player, but not nearly as complete as we were led to believe maybe last August. Round 6, number 211, also a pick they got from the Cowboys, also a compensatory pick. Hayden Connor, the guard from Texas. And then in round 7, number 225, a pick they got from the Jets. One of my favorite late round picks in the entire draft, Keaton Crawford, the safety from Nevada, who when I got to him, I thought, what in the world is this guy doing at Nevada? And then I look back at his history, and guess where he started? Oh, yeah, Austin. He was a Longhorn, and he can run and cover. And when we were on the field at the Combine watching him go through drills, I thought, man, he's really quick. And he went on my C list, my Combine recheck list for he's going to be one of the top few guys I look at when I get home right away. And there's a lot of range there. I'm not sure what led to his transfer to Nevada, but you might look at his school and say, oh, that's not a Nevada skill set. No shade at Nevada, but he absolutely could have stayed in Austin skill-wise. So I think Cardinals might have stolen one at the end of the draft.
I mean, what led to his transfer was that Texas kept bringing in really good safeties. You know, either they would bring him in as recruits and then bring him up through the system, or they would bring in guys like Makuba from outside the building. And, you know, at some point, guys like, I got to go get snaps somewhere. And so he went to Nevada, got drafted. I'd say it worked out for him, right?
Absolutely.
But I look at this overall draft and I kind of pair it with everything they did in March. And I know we did kind of a speed run through March, but I felt like it was a good conversation to have as a whole, right? So lost a bunch of guys in March, but did that so that they could give Trey McBride the bag. Did that so they could retain Baron Browning because they had to choose between Gardick and Browning, so they chose Browning. You know, you still kept your glue guy in Greg Dortch. But when they brought in Calais and they brought in Josh Sweat, to me, those two moves were what set themselves up to have a really, really good, you know, first 3 rounds or so of the draft, because it meant that they didn't have to reach on edge because they were in an area of the draft that was a little bit shaky if there was going to be an edge there that was worth that pick. But we knew there was likely going to be an interior defensive lineman that was going to be worth the pick because interior was so deep. So they're like, okay, let's get our edge in free agency. We think there's going to be a defensive tackle there that we like. And just in case the defensive tackle that we like needs guidance, to put it kindly, let's bring back Calais Campbell, who can be that guiding light for a young defensive tackle that I think needs an old man in his life that is also 6'8", 300 pounds, that can, you know, sit you down and say, look here, kid, you have all the talent in the world. I'm not going to let you fuck this up. And that is, I think, the Calais Campbell relationship with Walter Nolan, who has all the talent in the world and had very well documented maturity issues. Not bad off the field issues. I think there's, when people say, oh, he's got issues off the field, I think there's like really bad stuff, and I think there's maturity, and there's 2 levels to this thing. He never had really bad stuff. He had maturity issues. And I think for a young kid who was a top 3 recruit in the nation out of high school and who had a whole bunch of NIL money, and he's always been one of the most talented players on the field for his entire life, you can see how that's a recipe for not growing up early, right? So he's going to get to the NFL. You have Calais Campbell as that guiding light for how to be a pro, how to maximize your gifts, how to turn this opportunity into a very successful career. And I think, honestly, that is why they brought in Calais, was like, hey, we're thinking about taking this kid at 16. We can't do that with the current room we have. We need somebody like Campbell here to make this pick work. So I think the overall plan that Monty had as far as, all right, we have to pick between our edge rushers. Let's make sure Trey never leaves. Let's bring in the old man that can pay off our early round investment in the draft. Let's get an injury discount on Will Johnson, who could be a starting corner for us. Let's get Jordan Birch, who I think is a really good system fit for us. You know, maybe we'll light a couple day 3 picks on fire, but hey, who's counting? I think overall the execution of this offseason, while not perfect, was still really good, and it nudges them ever closer to being the team that almost makes it into the team that makes it.
And everything you said about the mentorship from Calais Campbell, off the field for Nolan, I think on the field for Jordan Birch, it's a wonderful fit because he plays the game in a very similar way. And he's going to pick up a lot of on field nuggets, that's Birch, from a player like Calais Campbell and say, hey, how can I leverage somewhat similar skills to you? A guy that's been doing it forever at a really high level. So not only will it help them pay off their early round pick, but also one of their mid round picks. So really good move by the Cardinals.
When it comes to UDFAs, I'm very sorry to disappoint you Cardinals fans. This is one of the few UDFA classes where I did not watch any of them. So I can't tell you if they got any gems here because their scouting department is a lot better funded than we are. And I think they... I think I topped out at like 280 names this year, and I think they pulled from outside those 280. So I wish I could give you some notes on any of their UDFAs. This is one of the only teams where I don't have any. EJ.
I don't really think they moved the needle with the UDFA class, and I would have liked to seen them do that because, as you mentioned at the top of this, they have had a ton of roster churn. And they're not there yet. This is not a team where there is completely limited opportunity for playing time. So it would seem an attractive destination. I don't know if Monty just doesn't prioritize that process. But it was a very small UDFA class. There's only 6 guys they brought in. I would have liked to see more. And certainly I would have liked to see a little bit more quality. Now, the UDFA process is the Wild West. There's a little bit more structure to it, but that was starting from absolute chaos. So that's not saying much. And sometimes it just doesn't work out. Sometimes teams don't prioritize it. Sometimes they make offers on 20 guys and they only get 6. So we're never really going to know how that worked out. But nobody that they brought in outside of maybe Elijah Simmons, as again, a heavy-bodied interior defensive lineman from Tennessee, to sort of take some of those snaps that they lost with a couple of guys that moved on from the defensive tackle rotation. I could see him fitting into that rotation, but it's none of these guys are needle movers for me.
So from there, we wrap this up by looking at our same 3 questions from the central pillar of this show, and really the central pillar of this series. What was their identity before? What do they want their identity to be now? And what is the goal for this season? What their identity was before was a very creative, explosive run game that got bogged down trying to throw too many go balls and forcing that to trying to force that to work, and it never did. So this offense probably should have been better than it was, and maybe wasted a really, really tremendous run game by getting bogged down with a vertical passing game that just wouldn't ever click. And then on defense, couldn't tackle really well against the run at all. Fun fact, Budda Baker led all defensive players in the entire NFL in missed tackles last year with 28. For somebody with his pedigree, unacceptable. So it wasn't just, the also-rans on that unit. It was even their quote-unquote best players that were missing tackles. So this was a defense that missed a lot of tackles, poor against the run, and yet still kept teams out of the end zone. Make it make sense. Very confusing team. You saw the pieces that should have fit together better than they did. So what do they want their identity to be now? Largely the same. I still think they're going to be a really good run game. Like, especially if you're looking at how much power and counter and pin and pull. Like, they ran more power, counter, and pin and pull than anybody else. Like, Greg Roman would weep looking at this run game. 40% of all their runs were power, counter, or pin and pull. They ran that more than zone. So if you want to see a creative run game, you look at Arizona first and foremost. I still think that's going to be their identity on offense. I still think they're going to try to throw a bunch of fades and go balls because that's what they drafted Marvin to do. And I think they're going to try to make it work. And God willing, it will this year. Maybe the extra 15 pounds of muscle will be the key to making this work. I know they're going to try it. So their identity on offense probably going to be the same. Their identity on defense, that is the big difference for this team. Ideally, they'll be better at tackling. And if they're better at tackling and they can get teams into even longer third down situations, and they just have, not the 27th worst pass rush in the NFL, just get me to like 17, 16, 17 in the league. Get me to average as far as pass rushes go. And the rest of this defense should click into place. Like, they were already an average scoring defense, even with a terrible pass rush. What can they be when they have an average pass rush? Could they be a top 10 overall scoring defense? It's very possible. I think their coaching staff is good. I think their DB talent is good. Linebacker, it's not the worst, but it's not like a strength, but it's all right. So, again, I look at this team, and if they can be a decent defense with a strong running game and a quarterback receiver combo that just works a little bit more than it did last year, they could win double-digit games and go to the playoffs. I think that's the identity they want. But that brings us to the goal. How high should this team set their sights? It's easy to fall into the trap and say they should challenge for the division because they weren't that far off from doing that last year. But I want to pump the brakes a little bit and just say, be a wild card team. Like, get back on the playoff horse. Just be a 6 seed, be a 7 seed, and be a tough 6 or 7 seed. Don't be like a Steelers kind of 7 seed where, you look at the schedule on wild card weekend and you're like, well, that's a loss. Like, be a 6 or 7 seed where people don't automatically assume you're going to lose. And then in 2026, we can start talking about win the division. But if they get to that status of, they're the plucky wild card team and you're not 100% sure if they're going to be an easy out, like if they get to that, I think Cardinals fans will be happy.
Yeah, I think there's 3 things the team has to focus on. 2 on defense. You have to tackle better, period. You said it, and that's just fundamental. They needed to do it last year. They have to just deliver on that this year. You can't, there's no more talk about that. Either you tackle well or you don't. They need to tackle well. If they don't, they're not going to improve markedly this season. The other one is they have to be scary on the pass rush. I don't really care how many sacks they get, but other teams kind of have to fear that they can do it when they need to. And they can do it in lots of different ways. They could do it with talent. They could do it with scheme. They could do it with a combination. Doesn't really matter. They just have to be able to scare teams. And on offense, this is really sort of the pay it off year for Kyler Murray. Like, if this year doesn't work with all of the experience he has now with running this offense, with the run game supporting him, with enough weapons at wide receiver, if he is fair to Midland again, I think the questions are going to ramp up loudly. And that's not fair. That's just a feature of being a quarterback in the NFL. At some point, the fingers are going to point directly at Kyler and go, I'm not sure he's a quarterback that can elevate the roster around him. If they do those 3 things, I really think, and this is going to sound like backhanded praise, and it's not, they have to concentrate on being over 500. Because if they can do that in this division, which is a really tough division, you can be in the hunt for a playoff spot, that wild card spot at the end of the season. I think that's where Arizona should be aiming to be, is being in strong contention for a playoff spot. And then, like you said, once you get there, scare some people. And if you play the kind of football I outlined, I think they can do that in the playoffs. If they've got a little bit of pass rush, their tackling, and their offense is good or even a little bit better, that's a scary team. That's a team that's not an easy out, not an automatic, they're not going to win that game if they make it to the playoffs. While that may not sound like really setting the bar high and being overachievers, it is the next step for this team to take because, lest we forget, 2 years ago, this team couldn't shoot straight. 3 years ago, this team couldn't shoot straight. They finally gotten sort of their footing underneath them. They almost made 500 last year. They've got to make 500 this year, and that'll keep them in a run for the playoff spot late in the season.
All right. And with that, we are now halfway through the NFC West. Seattle is tomorrow, then the Rams are the day after that. And then on Friday, for all of our lovely patrons, we do our NFC West recap show on the Patreon. Again, link in the description below or at the QR code on the screen right now. And on those patron-only episodes, we choose division winner. We choose all of our division awards. We do Coach of the Year, MVP, Rookie of the Year, Offensive Player, Defense Player of the Year, just for the NFC West. And we also do our bold predictions for this division. So if you want even more bootleg content, and specifically more Cardinals mentions, you can go become a patron. Also, we have our infographics for all things Cardinals and all things every team. We release new infographics every single day that an episode comes out to coincide with each team. So if you want to learn even more about the Cardinals or the rest of the NFC West, you can find that on our Patreon. Again, thank you once again for watching this late. If you're still here, really helps the algorithm. And we will see you back here same time tomorrow, talking Seahawks.